Okay, if I may draw the gathering to attention, thank you for attending, and I look forward to what my colleague Temba is going to say. He's going to be speaking about issues that I readily confess to knowing nothing about, which is South African politics. It's a complete mystery to me, and at least I have a colleague who seems to know something about it. All politics is a mystery to me. My view is very, very simple. The only person who ever went to Parliament with honest intentions was Guy Fawkes. And though, with my apology to members in the room who are or have been in Parliament, and Temba has been politically active from a very early age. From his student years, he's been a politically active radical. He was a hardcore Marxist-Leninist revolutionary. He was personally responsible for many of the bombs that were planted all over South Africa, at least. He's nodding, he's saying no, but he probably was, but maybe not. Maybe not, but he certainly was a real revolutionary, hardcore Marxist-Leninist. And when he came to the Free Market Foundation, he came essentially as a spy to work out what these horrible capitalists were up to. And he found our work and ideas so persuasive that he became a convert and is now a very active and passionate classical liberal or libertarian and one of us. He told a story which I'm sure he won't repeat now, but I'll tell it to you in advance. We had a video by the American economist Walter Williams, happens to be himself historically a black radical activist in American politics, advocating libertarian free market policies. Temba took this video home with him and watched it and was enraged and frothing at the mouth at how terrible and how it could be anyone could say these ghastly things. And he listened to it over and over again and couldn't fault anything. And eventually he just decided if he was intellectually honest, he had to be persuaded, which he has been, and he is our Cape Town parliamentary director who deals with politicians. None of the rest of us know how to, and he rubs shoulders with them on a daily basis, and he's politically astute and aware and guides us in this complex field. So with that, it's my pleasure to hand you to my colleague Temba, who is a truly remarkable person, and I could tell you some quite moving stories about how he's handled the transition in South Africa, having himself been brutally tortured at the hands of the apartheid regime. And if you want to know another Mandela type person, Temba is that person. So with that, over to Temba to give us his take on the political developments in South Africa. Thank you, Temba.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a confession to make. In 1994, when we held the first democratic elections post-apartheid in this country, I did not vote for the ANC. I've never been politically partisan at all. I voted for one of the small opposition parties. Your guess is as good as mine as to which one I had voted for. But what I can tell you, I had done that on the basis of a principle, in that I did not want any single political party to score something like 70%, 60% of the electoral votes, because my feeling and view firmly was that down the line, what would happen is that that party, being so dominant, wielding a 2/3 majority and above 2/3 majority, they might be corrupt. They might be corrupt. And this has been vindicated after Mandela and Thabo Mbeki, and the chickens have come home to roost. And I feel very much vindicated in terms of having voted on the basis of that principle. Now, the title of my talk is, can the 8th of May give us competition in government with dominant party? What are the chances? Would a political party or a coalition be better or worse for individual and economic freedom in South Africa? Now, I want to also state another thing up front. I would like you, when you engage me or comment on any aspect of my presentation, to not feel inhibited. Feel free, because be assured about the fact that whilst I am neither politically correct nor politically incorrect, I am most certainly politically incorrigible. So you can say whatever you want to say. Don't be diplomatic or too sensitive. I'd appreciate that. And I always encourage people to operate on that basis in terms of being free to articulate their views, comments, and you can be as critical as you want to be, because I do not have a monopoly on wisdom and on knowledge. Having said that, I want to begin now earnestly by mentioning the fact that I have been attending many presentations by renowned academics. And the latest presentation that I attended was by a well-informed Professor Callard. This was under the auspices of the American Chamber of Commerce in April in Cape Town. His presentation was very, very enlightening indeed. But the point was, his presentation was very much focused on the incumbent president, Cyril Ramaphosa, and investing the future of the country in him as the president of the country. And hence the title of his presentation, which was Election 2019 Scenarios. Will Ramaphosa get the results he needs to sustain his reform agenda? So that disturbed me a little bit, because I did not like the idea of investing South Africa's future in any single individual. And so it turned out that during the presentation by Professor Callard, he was advocating that. Very, very well-informed person, and who has been a consultant for the ANC on some aspect of their policies from time to time. And I was pleased that his presentation did enrich me to some extent in terms of the political analysis of the situation in South Africa just before the elections. Now, again, I engaged him on the basis of investing in one person, namely Buffalo Bull. And I had said to him, look, it doesn't make sense to me, because the problem is that we have in South Africa a situation where there is one party, which is the ruling party, that has been winning consecutive elections on a strong 2/3 majority, and that very fact itself being potentially corruptive. And I said, this is what we need to understand, because everything at the end of the day is a consequence of government policy, talking about the problems that afflict any country or the problems that afflict our country currently. They are a consequence of government policy. And he sort of could not submit to that, but he appreciated, the gist of my engagement in terms of his presentation. And now, listening to all the various academics, that does enrich me, enlighten me in terms of my own analysis of the political landscape before the elections, and also to some degree intellectually empowers me to go beyond the elections and project as to what the outcome might be and what it would mean for the country as a whole in terms of its policy implications. Now, I do something else. Now, I tend to be skeptical about statistics. I read, study, and accept statistics with a pinch of salt. because somebody once warned that statistics are like a bikini. What they reveal is suggestive, but what they conceal is vital. And so what I do, besides just attending the various presentations by the well-informed people, is that I do something that I don't think that many people do. Because when I want to fathom as to what the sentiments are, what the people are thinking, people who are at the grassroots level, say ordinary people, I don't know why people refer to them as ordinary people, but anyway, they constitute the bulk of the voting people, voting sector. These are the people who sometimes we dismiss as not being politically sophisticated or intellectually sophisticated, but these are people who are very important. They have their own views. How do I home in on what they're thinking? I indulge in this habit of boarding a train, third class section, so it's a third class carriage, and I just keep quiet and I listen as people converse or engage to one another, and there might be one or two people holding a newspaper, and this person might comment aloud on what they are reading at the time, and that would invite others to comment on that. And then that is how I get to know how people are thinking. And so my presentation is based on the intellectual input, as I have said, of various academics, but most importantly, and I attach much significance to this, listening to the people. It is very tempting at times to want to comment on what people are saying, but I try to restrain myself all the time and say to myself, just listen, Temba, because that is the purpose of you boarding a third class carriage. Go, and I would go to town and then take another train going to Salt River, Simonstown, third class, always listening all the time. And I get home and I distill that into specific facts, specific ideas and so on, and that is what informs my view of the landscape in terms of what prevails at the moment, and I'm able to project on the basis of that as to how people are going to vote. Now, a two-thirds majority is what has caused many of the problems, if not all, that confront us in this country. The high unemployment rate, some economists argue that is above 40%, the unemployment rate that is. We're talking about able-bodied people, and the economy is shrinking, and the high crime levels, and there's corruption on an unprecedented scale in this country. The list can go on. The hospital services, everything seems to be collapsing, is collapsing, doesn't seem to be collapsing, is collapsing. And it is all a consequence of a two-thirds majority mandate within Parliament that is won on consecutive terms. I have said to everybody that this would be the case even if it was the DA or the IFP or the Freedom Front that won elections on the basis of a two-thirds majority consecutively, that they be prone to corruption, but maybe not necessarily at the level as what is unfolding now in this country. I always state that, and people nod along and say, yeah, it is true, indeed. It is most definitely true. And what I want to also mention to you is that as the Free Market Foundation, we state our case up front. As I go about engaging people from the various political parties and wanting to fathom what the thinking is, what the policies are that they are espousing, I talk sometimes in a way that incurs the wrath of especially people from the ruling party. But I don't care about that, because I just simply say, I know the emperor has no clothes. I have no inhibitions about being upfront, being honest, to a point where I incur the wrath of some people. I state where I come from. And I've told many people, members of parliament in the ANC, that the two-thirds majority situation is what has caused all these problems. I say that the emperor has no clothes. There's no running away from that. Now, there is a saying that says, now a two-thirds majority, this is the problem with it. Again, let me add to what I've said before. With a two-thirds majority, you tend to think you are the government and not part of the government. And so the other thing is that you know that whatever policies you propose, you can just simply ride roughshod over other opposition parties, and you can simply ride roughshod over other people who might be, for example, affected directly by the policies that you're propounding. And so you sail through, and there is no safeguard against bad policies that you might be considering. And hence we end up with all these bad policies in this country. Now you also command a two-thirds majority, we wield so much power, and you tend to be afflicted with the problem that I refer to as legislative incontinence. You come up with all regulations, you come up with all policies, and these policies tend to suffocate individual liberties, economic freedom, at the end of the day, the spirit of enterprise, like a boa constrictor. That is what happens. You know, you will not have any repercussions in terms of policies that you enact. You are part of the ruling party, and that is it. You can, when the chickens come home to roost in terms of those bad policies, you will ride into the sunset with federal bags full of money, your salaries, your fringe benefits as a member of parliament, you know that. So there isn't anything that restrains you from implementing the wrong policies. And so the thing is, it is in the best interest of the country that no single party should ever achieve a two-thirds majority post the 8th of May. That is what I think should be the case. That is what I think South Africans should learn from what has been happening over the years. Now, Mandela was a special person. I know that the ANC at that time scored above 70%. I can't remember what percentage they scored, but Mandela was just a special person. That didn't go to his head. He was still humble, but the only exception, he was the only exception, and Thabo Mbeki did not stray too far from that. That is what we must always bear in mind. Mandela said, this was in 1993 or 1994, he had said the following words, and listen very carefully: you must support the African National Congress only so far as it delivers the goods. If the ANC does not deliver the goods, you must do to it what you have done to the apartheid regime. This was Mandela. This was Mandela. We were fortunate to have him as a president, you know, after apartheid. This is what he had said. Now you can be sure, confronted with these problems that afflict us in this country currently, Mandela would say, well, you do what has to be done, because the ANC has failed. This has got nothing to do with me hating the ANC. I have relatives in the ANC, some of them members of parliament, friends, former comrades in arms. But Mandela would say this, would say, you see, I told you. Now, you voting people, please do to the ANC what you did to the apartheid system. That is what Mandela would be saying, looking at what is happening right now in this country. When government fears the people, there is liberty. When the people fear the government, there is tyranny. This is the situation now. If you look at the business sector, the way they conduct themselves, the business enterprises, the executives thereof, in terms of their engagement of government on the basis of policy, they have their tails between the legs. They are frightened. And if you look at the populace generally, you can home in on the fact that some sectors of the South African population are also damn scared, because there is one organization that wields power that seems as if it's going to be around for a long, long time to come. And that situation tends to get people to be more accepting of what policies emanate from the government. And the business sector tends to be very timid in terms of engaging government on policies that they know are going to impact on business, which means the economy, detrimentally. That's the bad thing about the 2/3 majority. It has to be done away with. Well, democracy has its flaws. The democratic system I characterize as the best imperfect political system that we have. But it has inherent flaws. One of those flaws is the fact that people can vote, and the results thereof might result in a situation when there is one party that at some point tends to become a one-party dictatorship. I'm not saying we're there, but it could be argued from some perspectives that we are at that point, where there is one party that that constitutes operates as a one-party dictatorship. Now that's arguable, so I'm leaving that open. I don't have a strong view on that, but there are indications that we tend to be moving in that direction. Now, what gets us to get to this point? It is the democratic system itself. Democracy does not guarantee the best outcomes. It doesn't. Because look, if you look at Hitler's rise to power, it was via the democratic process. It was via the democratic process. And there are a lot of people who don't think things through very, very, very carefully. And some people vote on the basis of sentiment. They're not rational. Some people can say they are stupid people. I'm not sure about that. But the point is they will vote on the basis of sentiment and not really process things through rationally, intellectually. And given this, I think of the words of Julius Caesar, as Mark Antony would say, "O judgment, thou art fled to brutish beasts, and men have lost their reason." This is what defines what is happening, especially at that level where you find a sector of people do not seem to be thinking things through carefully. It's like when people say, well, this is my party because my parents, my grandparents were members of this party. We should not be thinking like that. We should not be thinking in terms of what policies are being propounded by which political parties. So I thought I should mention that. Now, politicians, members of parliament are just like anybody else. They can be as gullible as I am. And I remember the US columnist Edward Hale, when he was asked, "Do you pray for the senators?" His response was, no, I don't. I look at the senators and I pray for the country. And so I would advocate that you adopt that same stance as well and say, look, if somebody were to ask you for a prayer, I see many of the politicians submitting themselves to various churches and so on to be blessed. Those church leaders should be saying to them what Edward Hale had said. And so that's the crux of the problem that we have in this country. Democracy has also this weakness that can be extended from that point where I was talking about the danger of one-party rule, one-party dictatorship, that can get worse and move to a situation where you have a kakistocratic system. Kakistocracy actually just simply means it tends to be, sounds like close to the Afrikaans first part of the word, which is not a nice word, kakistocracy. That is how kakistocracy, I don't want to repeat it, I feel uncomfortable about that. But what it means is this seems to be appropriate for this kind of system, because what it is that is the government by the worst people, by the scandalous people, by the corrupt people, by the least competent people. That's what it is. And you can imagine what the outcome will be when such people constitute the government. We have in Parliament a situation where, if you look at the ruling party membership, something like 3/4 of them have been implicated in criminal tendencies. Let me put it down as tendencies, because it's not been referred to the court of law at this stage. Right. And we are our own worst enemies. We are the architects of our destruction, because it is the people that vote for such people of low caliber to be in Parliament and run the country. So we are the ones who are responsible for that. I am no exception to that. I'm also partially responsible for this, and many people. And there is a story, a fable by Aesop, that drives this point home, that sometimes we are our own worst enemies. We are the architects of our miseries, of our destruction. He tells the fable of an eagle that was soaring up high and was perched on the top of a mountain. And so there is this person who had a bow and arrow, and he aimed it at the eagle, shot it through its heart. And as the eagle was falling, it took a glance at the arrow that pierced its body, and it saw one of its feathers and said, I am killed with my own feathers. And so it is in South Africa, that we should not say it is only just the members of Parliament who are responsible for this mess. We are also implicated in terms of what has happened, in terms of the problems, challenges that confront us in this country. But this does not mean that we cannot do anything about this. It doesn't mean that it depends on the voters themselves. And this is very, very important for us to be always conscious of this. Now, the fault, dear Brutus, is not in the stars, but in ourselves, that we are underlings. That was Julius Caesar. It is, I want to drive this point home, that we are the ones who are the architects of our own destruction, of our own miseries, that ultimately emanate from Parliament in terms of the policies that have a detrimental effect on us all in this country. Now, if I look at the voting trends, if you ask me as to which is the best case scenario in terms of the election outcomes, for me, it is a situation, it would be, and that would be cause for me to pull out a bottle of champagne and start celebrating and say, wow, this is now a democratic governance that we are seeing is going to happen. We are really going to be seriously democratic in this country. We are going to have a situation where there is going to be accountability, where there are going to be consequences for the people and members of Parliament whose hands have been found from time to time in the cookie jar with no consequences whatsoever. Now, let me depict a scenario of the ANC's majority being reduced to, say, less than 50%, which is highly unlikely, but not impossible. Highly unlikely, but not impossible, but conceivable. So The ANC, after the elections, their voting percentage is reduced to say 49%. That would be the best outcome. Not that I want to do anything about contributing to the ANC's demise. I'm looking at this from the perspective of what would be in the best interest of the country. The best interest of the country. So 49% ANC and the 51% distributed amongst the various opposition parties, some of which have 2 members, some might have just only 1 member, and in parliament at the end of the day. I'm saying that would be the best scenario, because the thing is, we know that there is an ideological rift amongst all these opposition parties, and it seems that nothing could bring them closer to one another so that they could constitute a ruling coalition. I'd say no. That would not be the case. The situation itself would dictate to the various opposition parties that if you want to be at the center of government, being part of the process of enacting policies, this is the only chance that you have, irrespective of your ideological agenda. This is the only chance you have. The train will not come this way again. And so that would cause them to say, let us be together and discuss this situation of a ruling coalition. Now, we know that in Johannesburg, the municipality, you have the DA operating together with the economic freedom fighters. It was inconceivable just only up to a short while ago, but it is happening. And so they've set aside their differences, ideological differences, and they've said to themselves, that is how I analyze it, but if we want to co-govern Johannesburg, we have to come together. And so that is what has happened. Now, in the broader picture, where you would have this 51% in favor of, say, the ANC respectively, and the coalition, potential coalition bloc, that's exactly what would happen. And I can imagine in this scenario that the heads of the various political parties say, okay, it's horse trading now. Let's talk about the various ministries, the portfolios, what is going to happen. I can imagine the DA saying, the Minister of Finance, Minister of Trade and Industry, that's ours, non-negotiable, the rest you can take whatever you want. I can see the Freedom Front Plus leader, Dr. Groenewald, I think that is his name, saying, agriculture is ours. That's our portfolio. A Boermaka plan, remember? And we can take you to various places where you have farms that have been run by Afrikaners and so on. So we know. So that is ours, non-negotiable, take whatever else you want. We're not interested in it. I can see General Holomisa saying, well, we've always been for law and order. Law and order. For us, naturally, what should accrue to us would be the SAPS, South African Police Services. I'm not quite sure what the portfolio is called precisely, but I can see them saying, this is ours. We're going to see law and order in this country, and please, leave us alone to deliver law and order in this country. I can see them arguing on that basis. Now, then you look at the EFF. Remember, they have an axe to grind, especially with the ANC. They have decried the fact that there are people in the ANC who ought to be wearing those yellow overalls, that they should be in prison. I can see them saying, look, we are interested in justice. The Minister of Justice should come from us. And then we're going to sort things out. Remember, they have an axe to grind with everybody else. And as far as the economy is concerned, we know that they have a socialist agenda, but what would please them most will be that they secure that portfolio. So they say, now, Ministry of Justice, that comes from us. And I can see them revamping the course. I can see them coming up with all sorts of creative ideas. I can see that happening. I can see the ACDP person, they might have maybe 5 members, 2 members, maybe 10 members after the elections. I can see Ken Meshu saying, look, for us, the most important cause is for the state, the separation of the state, maybe separation of the state and the church, on the basis of we don't want the state to come up with regulations that are going to govern the churches. The churches should be autonomous, and should be independent, should be left alone. I can see him sticking to that. And so I can see him, given interest in his interest that is representing the ACDP, I can see him saying, look, for us, it's going to be the Ministry of Culture kind of story. I can see him saying, oh, I'm satisfied with this. I don't care what the rest of you are doing. Now, consider that they actually come to a point where they agree amongst themselves that we are going to constitute now the ruling coalition. There'd be pressure on the ruling coalition because they'd have to demonstrate that they are different to the government, the previous government, especially on the basis of delivery, especially on the basis of achieving high economic growth rates, especially on all the positive things that South Africans aspire to. I can see them being desperate to attend to those policies that they come up with in terms of actually getting them implemented. I can see that happening. It would happen. It will be inevitable. They wouldn't just sit back and say, well, things take time and we must understand, things take time. I can see them rushing. I can see them rushing. Let us move on. There's real pressure. I can see that in that scenario, that there will be a conflict between the economic policies, what they have in mind of the DA, and on the one hand, and the economic policies, especially of the EFF on the other hand. I can see the DA saying to the EFF policymakers, and the economists among them, show us, demonstrate to us that nationalization delivers, that socialism has delivered, because the empirical evidence is that socialist policies do not deliver at all. They impoverish countries, they impoverish the economies, and this is the evidence of the world. I can see that the DA's arguments would prevail over the arguments of the EFF. And I can see the DA and other, let's say, right-of-center political parties, to put it generally, I can see them saying, well, look at Zimbabwe, what happened. Socialist policies, big government policies. Look at what is happening right now, what is unfolding in Venezuela. Everybody sees it on TV. That's a real example, a dramatic one, to demonstrate that economic policies do not deliver. If they deliver at all, they impoverish economies. For me, this would be such a dynamic outcome of the elections, and it would be the one worth celebrating. Now, Jane, were you indicating the time to me? Oh no, okay, because I saw your hands being flailing up. Now, the real politic of the scenario post-election, the ANC's majority has come down to 49%, and you have the 51%. As I've said, that would be the best outcome. Just remove your political party head, and just look at that scenario. It would be very, very good. Now, even if, say, the ANC's majority was reduced to 55%, it would still be moving better from the current situation. Because what it would mean that is that the ANC would have to engage other political parties, take them seriously, not run roughshod over them, because they would be a departure from the two-thirds majority scenario where the ANC used to ride roughshod over other opposition parties and any other interest groups representing some sectors of the communities, the nation, or the economy that would be detrimentally impacted upon. It will still be worth celebrating, maybe a small bottle of champagne, but it would be worth, celebrating. Now, the thing is, any forecast on the outcome of the elections must be accompanied by an indulgence in crystal ball gazing. Nothing can be 100% correct in terms of what the outcome might be, but looking at the general sentiments of the people, I can see things tending to move towards a situation where the ANC's current majority, near two-thirds position, being reduced and coming down. And that would be something, as I've said, worth celebrating. Now, some people state that the ANC should be given another chance. And some people are receptive to that. That is rubbish. It would be one of those things where that would result in a situation where some people could just simply move ahead and vote for the ANC the way that they have been voting. And so it's of paramount importance that people be encouraged to think rationally. Now, the challenge that it is faced in terms of getting people to a position where they start to think really clearly, rationally, in intellectual terms, and start to engage policy proposals, existing policies on the basis of that, then deciding as to which party to vote for, is the fact that many people who are disillusioned with the ANC or any of the other opposition parties might tend to just simply not turn up to go and vote, and rather simply decide to watch The Bold and the Beautiful and the Queen. That's another soap opera on the Queen, and over beers, and it would be a nice holiday kind of thing, and so on. Those are the people who, if they turned out to vote, who are registered, would really tilt the balance more towards a 49% election result for the ANC. I don't think there's much that anyone can do about that, but I think it is important that when we engage or converse with people that we know on a one-on-one basis, that one should consider raising this point on this basis in terms of this sort of ruling coalition scenario. That to me is something that's very important for all of us to do individually. Now, I'm not imposing an agenda on you. What I'm doing is to explain to you how things, having accepted in principle that a 49-51% in favor of a potential ruling coalition, that in order to achieve that, we must consider, if that is accepted, on an individual basis, as if what we could do to start to get things to move in that direction. I am convinced, I am of the firm view that in a 51% in favor of a potential ruling coalition, things would start moving towards individual and economic freedom, without a doubt. Things would start moving in that direction. And as we have seen, all the policies, virtually, or most of the policies that have been enacted by the ANC post-Mandela and Thabo Mbeki have had this tendency of constricting the spirit of enterprise by strangling, by compromising, by undermining individual individual freedoms and especially economic freedoms of people. And for me, that is why I would really celebrate a situation where it would be the ruling coalition's demise coming down to less than, say, 50%, and the 51% being split amongst the opposition parties. Now, I want to mention something here from Mandela again. The name keeps coming up from time to time in my mind because I really got to know this man very, very well. Mandela said the following words: "Freedom is indivisible. There's chains on any one of my people were the chains on all of them. The chains on all of my people were the chains on me." This is Mandela. This is Mandela. So at the end of the day, we aspire to an election results sort of scenario that would bring us nearer to this situation where people would enjoy freedoms, individual freedoms, economic freedoms particularly, and thus Mandela's dream would be achieved. It's a dream that was interrupted when the Zuma administration kicked in. And I think at this point, I should field questions. If there are any questions you want to raise, I really would love that, as many questions as possible. Otherwise, I could still go on forever beyond my time. Right. Okay, let me listen to you. First question, Rob.
One of the problems that strikes me in our system is that because of the proportional representation, the MPs are beholden not to the constituencies but to the party. Now this leads on to a question which I find fascinating, but I don't have the slightest idea of how this would pan out. Is it even theoretically possible that the ANC post-election could split? And if this were to happen, how would the mechanics play out, bearing in mind that the MPs owe their allegiance to the party, and I'm not sure who the party is. Some people would say Ace Magashula, as Secretary General of the ANC, pulls the strings in terms of, but that may not be entirely correct. And I just would like to hear your views.
Yeah, again, that would entail some bit of indulging in crystal ball gazing. There are indications that the ANC might split up. As to when that might happen, that's another question. Currently, the situation is that if you're talking about the ANC, you can't talk about the ANC without considering it in the context of the ruling tripartite alliance. The other partners of that alliance are socialists, without a doubt. We've seen how they've come out on the basis of socialism, socialist-oriented policies, and the ANC, you have the ANC in the context of that. Now, what that means is that because Ramaphosa himself currently is desperate for votes, because he also is aware of the fact that Zuma is not rolling over to die, that he might be up to some political mischief, because he knows that or feels that if the ANC were to win through on a strong majority or even 51%, whatever the case, they will not let up on the cases that he has to face. So it will be in his interest to sabotage the ANC. As to how he would go about doing that, I don't know. Some people have speculated that the African transformation movement is part of Zuma's situation. I'm not sure about that. I have not honed in on any evidence to substantiate that view, but there is nevertheless that view. We all know that Zuma will not roll over and die. We do know that, because he has a whole list of cases that are pending. And so that's one thing that we have to factor into this consideration. Now, the ANC, the ruling alliance is a bit fragile at the moment. It really is. It's fragile at the moment. It's fragile because of all sorts of reasons. And one of them is that if you're looking at the ANC itself, you are looking at somebody like the deputy president, we are looking at some, and others as well, who must be shaking in their trousers and thinking, gosh, there might be court implications in terms of what I have done, what is being alleged against me, what I've been implicated in kind of story. So there could be a breakup if, say, many people in the ANC were actually threatened with court action. I think that is one thing that would contribute to the breaking of the ANC. Now, coming to the proportional representation system, now if we had not had a proportional representation system with the first elections in 1994, I can tell you that because the apartheid military machine was intact, because you had vociferous groups like the Avier Bier who were busy organizing themselves militarily, that they would have said, look, this is it. It would have precipitated a civil war. For me, that is something that we should always be aware of, that it came at the right time, right in 1994, implemented accordingly, people voting accordingly. Now, that PR system absorbed all those political energies that would have been recalcitrant in terms of abiding by the system. So they voted. You had the Herzichtige Nationale Partij, you had the Conservative Party. There were all these formations. You had the military leadership of the South African Army being intact. And so that is the saving grace of the PR system. Now, of course, we know what has happened over time, and that is with on the PR system, people do not vote for any member of parliament directly. They vote for political parties. And so vote for a political party, you have the party hierarchy deciding at the end of the day who is going to be a member of parliament or not. That situation is of being conducive to a very corruptive sort of situation whereby you want to curry favor with the party hierarchy. And this happens with all the various political parties. You curry favor with the top guys because that situation might result in you being a member of parliament at the end of the day, acting in your best self-interest. And so, unfortunately, that is a situation that we have now, currently. And I don't think that system will change very soon. It would change if the ANC came down to that level, say, of 49% or even further down that way. But right now, it's good for them. It's good for them. I hope that answers your question. In some cases, indirectly.
Temba, as always, I enjoyed listening to you. But I want to take you from the macro to the micro. Every morning when I read my newspaper at the moment, there's a very well-regarded ex-editor of that newspaper who is pleading with us to support the ANC in the forthcoming election in order to provide the President Ramaphosa, with the muscle to tackle corruption. I don't want to mention the editor's name, but I'm sure everyone knows who I'm talking about. How would you answer him?
It's very simple. The way that I had explained about Buffalo Bull, you don't invest the country's future in one person, a messiah, whoever it might be. You do not do that. You don't do that. If we're looking at Buffalo Bull, at President Ramaphosa, I don't want him to feel that I've demonized him. I know that he won't like me that much when he gets to know what I've been saying. But the point is, I'm talking at the level of principle. Now, Ramaphosa, he was the deputy president during the Zuma administration. What did he do? He didn't do anything. He went along with what was going on. And if you look, you fast forward to him now being the president of the country currently, you look at the policies that he has enacted, that he has advanced, that he has backed up. It is the expropriation of land without compensation. It is also the national minimum wage, which will have definitely detrimental effects, detrimental impact on trying to deal with the unemployment situation that bedevils us. The list is long. I find such a sentiment. For me, it's a sentiment, not really a rational view as such, that's expressed by that editor. I find it inconceivable. It doesn't make sense at all. The thing is, at the end of the day, the way I would engage him, what I would suggest in terms of engaging him would be that the problem is with the 2/3 majority scenario being one achieved on consecutive terms, election terms. That's the basic problem. It is the basic problem. If one thinks it through, one will realize that. And I don't know, because Ramaphosa comes at the time when we feel that he's a respite from the Zuma fiasco of the Zuma administration. With the Zuma administration, in terms of what we've experienced, we've always felt, of course, anybody else other than Zuma, that would make us happy. That would make us happy. That would be the ideal situation. So that sentiment's translated into the view expressed by such people, such as that editor and many other people. And unfortunately, it does not make sense at all. It will not get us anywhere. Now, we know this. Now, he is definitely not Mandela, who sticks on principle. He is definitely not Thabo Mbeki. And we've seen how he's been good and he's excelling at this game of running with the hares and hunting with the hounds. So he moves like this, So we don't need that. We need a president who will look at the big picture, who will try to move us away from affirmative action, BEE policies. So I have to bring this in this regard. We will say the rainbow nation, successful, prosperous rainbow nation, will be achieved in terms of these policies. Policies that are divisive are not going to be good for us. They're not good for us. We need to have policies, not a messiah. We need to have policies that are going to be seductive to foreign direct investors, so that they will line up and say, look, this is the market that we need to invest in. So we need to look at policies and not invest South Africa's future in some kind of messiah. Whoever it might be, it is the policies that have to be changed, and new policies to be implemented, that are going to be conducive to the spirit of enterprise flourishing, jobs being created. And unfortunately, he's missing the boat. He's guided by his heart, by his sentiment. He's missing the boat big time. And it's serious because he's an editor, you see. He's an editor, but he should be taken to task.
Temba, I think you're so right about that one shouldn't vote for the individual, but for a party which has a track record and which has policies in place. There's no rocket science in this. The simple reason is that individual may be taken out, in many ways. And when that individual goes, all you're left with is the track record and the policies of that party. And quite frankly, as far as the ANC is concerned, another simplicity is once bitten, twice shy. It was a former speaker at the podium here, an economist, Davy Rutt, who said that the ANC has been an unmitigated disaster for this country. And frankly, to give them another go, and I accept that it's going to happen, but it must happen with a reduced majority so that they start negotiating into sensible paths as you described tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the comment. I don't think it was a response, but much appreciated. So, Leon, let us be good hosts and start with our guest, and then I'll come back to you.
Temba, there was for me, a very disturbing interview that Creamer Media did with Raymond Satner. Raymond Satner pointed out how vulnerable Ramaphosa is within the ANC, that he got elected on a very slim margin, with a large number of voters excluded from that conference. His scenario is that it's a very high probability that Ramaphosa will be recalled. This would mean he'll probably be replaced by David Mabuza. And I think the ANC realized that if Zuma was to carry on as president, they would do very badly in this election. And so what they have done, given that there are still, there's a lot of Stalinist thinking within the ANC, that they probably decided, who can we have as the useful idiot? And they decided that poor Cyril Ramaphosa would be the useful idiot to secure the next election for the ANC, so that they could then get in their own man to continue on with the corruption. How valid do you think that scenario is?
Yeah, I can to some degree empathize with that scenario. And the way I see it, let's just extend that scenario to a point where I would bring in my own sort of idea. And that idea is that, let us say, the way things are right now, it seems as if he is being set up for failure. My view is, if the ANC's majority would be to be reduced, say, even by 5%, say 5% or even 3%, that would be the basis for the others within the ANC saying, well, we need to recall the president because of this drop in terms of our support, electorally. And it would be the basis for that. I think he would be recalled. I think Raymond Satner is right, and I think that is what would happen. And afterwards, it will be somebody, maybe somebody who might be worse, even far worse than Ramaphosa. But the point is, he's not capable of taking a stand on anything. He does not have that caliber of integrity, that is required of a leadership for the country. And so for me, if he were to go, I would not weep over that. Say, well, that's it. It would not mean much to me. And I would just watch as to who would emerge out of that ANC mess to be the president of the country. So even then, if that were to happen, I think the person would come from the left of center still, maybe far to the left of Ramaphosa. But that is the price that he has to pay. But if I was him, given the political circumstances that he has to contend with, I would say, for example, sorry, I take a stand on the EWC, because this is one single policy that is going to damage the economy, and while sending out the negative signals to potential investors, and whilst also precipitating a flight of capital from this country. If I was him, I'd say, I'm sorry, yes, when we had our NEC conference, I think it was in December, this was one of the policy stands that was articulated at the time. I'm sorry, I'd say, given that, I'm sorry, I'm the president of a country and not of the ANC, like Mandela would always say. If I'm going to fall on the basis on this, let it be. So that's not him. Anyway, I think it was more the case that you were explaining something than actually posing a question, and you were actually inviting me to comment on that, and so that's what I did. Yeah. Could we start with my colleague here, Leon, and then we'll come back to you. You will have the time. Leon.
As MC, might not be appropriate for me to say anything, but I'm going to first a comment and then a question. And the comment is the Free Market Foundation takes no position on political parties and has no affiliation with parties. We actually are in formal partnerships right now with the ANC, the DA, the IFP and local governments, where we implementing policies with them, and we are working with the EFF in a particular, in a direct relationship, and we have good relations with other parties, COPE and UDM. So I just want to make it clear the Free Market Foundation has no party political preference or affiliation. The question is this, that there seems to me to be a mismatch between criticism of the ANC, of which I myself admit to being critical in many ways, with the reality on the ground. And I want you to comment on this. The reality on the ground is that black South Africans have done extremely well since 1994. All of the empirical data, life expectancy, access to potable water, housing, motorized transport, literacy rates, absolutely everything, the statistics are quite phenomenal. And for black South Africans to vote for the ANC is completely rational based on the spectacular rise in the living standards of black South Africans since '94. And for those of you who might not be concerned with the data, there's what I call research by looking. If you drive through, for example, Bosbokrand, Bushbuck Ridge on your way to the Kruger Park, if you went there in 1994, it was slums and goats and mud and dust roads, and if you drive through there now, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of middle-class houses. People without title deeds are investing millions. The quality of life has gone up. If you go up into the other one of the poorest areas of the country, Makatini, flats in the north of KZN, Kuzi area, the same thing. What used to be one of the most poverty-stricken areas of the country, people living in mud huts, impoverished. You go there now and there are shopping centres and filling stations and tarred roads and people with running hot and cold water and so on. So my question is, I think that it can be argued very, very compellingly that by every objective indicator, the quality of life of black South Africans has gone up spectacularly. And all of the rhetoric from Oxfam, as I call them, and others, that there's growing inequality is simply empirically false. The life expectancy, for example, which is the best indicator of health, is that the quality of the health of black South Africans has caught up, virtually completely closed the gap on white South Africans, and the living standard, life expectancy is now the same. So my question is, I'm not pro-ANC or anti-ANC, but the point is the empirical data is that under the ANC, black South Africans have done well. Why would any black South African not vote ANC? The data is completely overwhelming. If I were the ANC's propagandist, I think I could do a much better job than they do.
Yeah. Thanks, Leon. First of all, the nature of the subject is that it is a political subject. So my presentation was on the basis of that. Now, then, in the same breath, what I want to say is, everything that you've said about life improving for most black people in this country is factually true, empirically. There's researchers there, the Institute of Race Relations has done the study over many, many years. But the point is, people listen to the politicians. They are politicians, they are leaders who know that we have agonized over the fact that the ANC is not really taking ownership of what has been achieved. They don't do that. Now, and the leadership is focused more on the political life of the ANC, the political aspirations of the ANC, the political survival of the ANC. And it's very easy to convince people that they are victims. Hitler did it, and Mussolini, and many other dictators did. It's very easy to convince people, persuade people, even amongst those people who are economically self-sufficient, to say to them, well, you are poor, well, your life is miserable, well, the thing is, something has to be done about this, and we, the ANC does not take up, build on that, and capitalize on that, and say we take responsibility for this, and so voters for us again. They will not get anywhere. Now, their agenda is to convince people that you are miserable, your life is miserable, it is because of apartheid, It is because of colonialism, colonialism. It is because of imperialism. It is because of white monopoly capital. You keep harping on that string, and it latches on, and people buy into that, and they become the voting fodder, and that's the game that they are playing. The leaders are just politicians and nothing else, and so. That is the situation. That's my answer to what you're saying. Now, the Free Market Foundation, as Leon has pointed out, is political non-partisan. We're not interested in any political parties. Yes, we engage all various political parties right across the parliamentary spectrum, and outside of that, we engage with traditional leaders who come from all sorts of various party persuasions and hold all sorts of different views. And sometimes what happens, this has happened quite a great deal, there would be approaches to us from the various political parties for us to engage or suggest a particular policy issue and how that could be put together. This happens on an ongoing basis, but the point is the emperor has no clothes in terms of my presentation. And that's a situation that has to be dealt with. And the politicians, the leaders of the ANC, are not capable of moving away from that and actually articulating the facts that Leon has alluded to. And because they don't see how that can achieve votes. They don't see that. That is how they are so myopic, because they could, if they sat down and really wrapped our minds around that as to how they could capitalize on what has been achieved, and use that as a stepping stone to get to a situation where they can hang on to the 2/3 majority. But for me, in the best interest of a country, whatever happens, I don't care what it might be, we need to move away from a situation where there is one dominant party that wields a 2/3 majority. That would translate into real accountable and democratic governance. It will be dynamic. Sorry, could we start with the others? With a couple of hands around here. I saw a hand somewhere there. After you, Mbiake. Yeah. Okay, because we don't want to be accused of intellectual incest, being part of the Free Market Foundation. So I'm conscious of that. And there's a hand right at the back there.
Thanks. I agree the statistics are saying the numbers are there, but the quality is not. And I think that's where the failure has come through. You yourself said we've got policies, but the delivery of those policies, we've got some fantastic world-class policies, but we haven't been able to deliver on them. We've got municipalities collapsing. Even Joburg is collapsing. We've got huge problems within the systems there. You look at the VAR, you look at the pollution that we're dealing with. It's because the systems are collapsing. So the numbers may be there, but the houses are falling down. The education system, what have we got? A whole lot of uneducated kids at the end of the day. And I think that is where the truth is. The numbers may be there, but I don't think the quality is there.
Yeah, look, when it comes to the education, quality of education, the one scenario that would effectively address that would be allowing a policy situation, an environment where there would be a proliferation of private schools competing amongst themselves on the basis of offering a good education. That would be the best case scenario. Let the government have its own schools, but not restrict the proliferation of, private schools. That can only come about when we have the ANC's majority being reduced. This is not a statement against the ANC. If it was the case that it was the DA that was holding this position, the lessons would be relevant. Still, it would be relevant to propose, that these policies that we have and others, like the Institute of Race Relations have, that they should be considered seriously. But a receptive parliamentary year will come about only when we have horse trading, when we have parties almost equally having to engage one another on the policies that are being proposed. For me, that is why I invest my optimism in that kind of situation where there is a ruling coalition situation. And for me, that is why I believe in this. It is because it is the one that will translate into a policy environment that will be receptive to empirically well-informed, rational policies that have to be adopted. Biake?
So I just wanted to comment on the comparisons to 1994. It's not clear that to people of, let's say, our generation, that it would mean much. I mean, I'm sure there's been a lot of improvement, but to people of our generation, having no memory of what came before, we want our lives to be better than it was last year, yesterday. And so, given that, I think it's the message that we should be. It's not so much about the specific policy; it's about the message. The message is it's either you've been a victim of someone else, or you can take charge of your life now. So what message are the political parties putting forward to young people? Are they saying that you are a victim and you will forever be a victim and then you need government to do something for you? Or are they saying that you can take charge of your life, then we'll just get out of your way?
Yeah, Piak, thanks for that, but I don't think that would go achieve much at all, what you're advocating by appealing to people at the micro level, micro individual level, and actually saying, look, take charge of your life kind of situation. I don't think that would achieve much. It would in some cases, because the point is, when you inculcate a mindset of victimhood, I am the victim, nobody has to actually tell you who the perpetrator is, who is responsible for that. And because color is still much an issue in South Africa, if you are black and you constantly are exposed to that idea, you will identify white people as being the cause of the bad things that you perceive we are having to endure, the misery that you are having to persevere in, have to deal with in. That is why people have never questioned this concept of white monopoly capital. And it's based on a book, Monopoly Capital, by Baran and Sweezy. I read it quite a couple of years ago. I think I was about 30 years of age when I read that. But they've been smart to add white monopoly capital to it. It has an appeal. You know, it has an appeal. I've done this to check this out by asking people, do you believe in white monopoly capital, that there is such a thing? Oh, yes. They're the ones who are responsible for all the bad things that are happening to us, kind of thing. And I've said to them, have you asked as to where the white monopoly offices, the headquarters are located? Oh, Temba, what are you talking about? No. When you say white monopoly capital, you're talking about this amorphous thing that nobody seems to even care to define it precisely as to what it is and how it has damaged the country the way they see it. They can't. Even amongst those who are politically intellectually sophisticated, when I've engaged them on this basis, they can't respond in a rational way. But the point is, for quite a number of people, amongst the rank and file members, across political parties, those who are black, it resonates with them. They don't say, oh, by the way, I've improved my lot by having upgraded from this shanty, and now I live in a brick and mortar house. I got a job. That they don't think like that. There's just something about inculcating, the mindset of being a victim that tends not to be resisted by the people who are not victims, but who might be the people that you are targeting. And so, as I've said, who's responsible? White monopoly capital, apartheid. There is no shortage of scapegoats. There is no shortage of scapegoats. That is a problem that we have in this country. And so these ideas, the idea of being a victim takes root, and then it flourishes. There was another hand. Okay, wasn't there another hand there before I come to you? Sorry. Okay.
Temba,
Okay, sure.
where is the youth in the ruling party? And I asked that question thinking about the likes of Steve Biko, Chris Harney, and bearing in mind that in 1976 it was the youth of this country that did so much to bring about transformation in this country. Where is the youth in our ruling party?
Yeah, okay. Part of the answer to that is the fact that with the emergence of the EFF, all that youth unemployed, if there wasn't the EFF, that energy, that absorbed that energy, they would have a situation where it would take just something, or whatever spark it might be, that could precipitate a kind of Tunisia sort of situation. People just simply spontaneously just going about their business, smashing things and so on, and kind of thing, bringing about a regime change kind of thing. If there wasn't the EFF, I think we'd be moving towards that kind of situation. Remember, with Tunisia, what sparked that off was the fact that Mohamed Bouazizi, I think he was 22 years of age, he was operating a stall by the roadside. And they was constantly being harassed by law enforcement or government officials. And at some point, when his stuff was confiscated, he decided to set himself alight. That was one spark that triggered, you know, the so-called Arab Spring, which was a spontaneous uprising. Now, I cannot think of a situation where there could be a spark that would trigger that kind of revolt by the youth, such as was the case in 1976. I don't think there is such. We must recognize the fact that the EFF has absorbed that energy. So you go to their rallies, it is all those young people who are there, and they're listening to that voice. They're listening to what Malema is saying. We will do this, we will do that, we will do that. We will achieve 10% economic growth. We will, I don't know how that could be possible given the socialist policies that they are advocating. But the point is that it seems to me, maybe I'm wrong on this, it seems to me all that potentially destructive in a positive way in terms of regime change amongst the youth has been absorbed into the EFF. That's not to mean that, well, it's a good thing only in terms of that. It is like the RVB in the context of the proportional representation system. That is what actually negated them. They couldn't deal with that because there were many Afrikaners who were thinking, oh, well, there is at least this proportional representation system, which means that we'd be able to participate in government by electing our own people. You know, so there is that parallel story to that. That's an answer to your question. Any other questions?
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
I'm not going to do any formal thanks to my colleague Temba because who knows, I might end up criticizing him for neglecting his work during today, preparing for this talk. But let's just thank you, Temba, for your analysis. And if I can say, in the Free Market Foundation, for at least being somebody who kind of can name a few politicians. Most of us here can't do that. So thanks, Temba.